Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at the Naga Sadhus of India. We've got some really incredible source material here, which gives us a glimpse into this mysterious group. I mean, we're talking about their history, their beliefs, and even their, well, let's just say, intense practices.
Yeah, it's captivating stuff.
Yeah.
They're almost like a living bridge back to ancient India. I mean, they embody traditions that go back centuries, maybe even millennia.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to unpack today. Who they are, what they believe, and what those intense practices actually involve. I mean, we're talking about a group dedicated to Lord Shiva, practicing extreme asceticism. And they even have a history as warriors defending Hinduism. So where do we even begin with a group like this?
Well, a lot of people just think about the image of the Naga Sadhu.
Yeah.
Often seen naked, covered in ash, with dreadlocks, holding a trishul. But you can imagine there's a lot more to their story than just that initial visual.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Naga means mountain, and sadhu refers to an ascetic or holy person. So basically, we're talking about mountain ascetics. But their history is where things get really interesting. One of our sources even suggests that they might be depicted on ancient coins from Mohenjo-Daro, which was part of the Indus Valley civilization. We're talking thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it's a fascinating connection if it's true. I mean, the Naga tradition would be incredibly old.
Yeah.
And there are these other historical encounters that just add to the mystery. Like Alexander the Great supposedly met Naga Sadhus during his Indian campaign. That must have been something else. A Macedonian king face-to-face with these, fierce, naked ascetics.
Talk about a culture clash, right? Our sources also mention encounters with Buddha and Mahavira, who is the founder of Jainism, which just goes to show how long they've been a part of Indian society.
Yeah. And in encounters like these, they really make you think that the Naga Sadhus had this huge impact on all these different religious and philosophical movements.
It really makes you think about what those conversations must have been like.
For sure. And then we can't forget about their historical role as protectors of Hinduism. It wasn't all just meditating in caves. I mean, they organized themselves into akhadas, which were basically these warrior monk orders.
So when invaders, especially the Mughals, threatened Hindu temples and communities, the Naga Sadhus were the ones that stepped up to defend them.
Exactly. Imagine them as a kind of militant monastic order.
Yeah.
Known for just how ferocious they were in battle.
Wow.
Yeah, they fiercely defended temples and even engaged in direct combat against the Mughal emperors, like Aurangzeb, for example.
Our sources even talk specifically about their role in protecting Shiv mandirs, which, knowing their devotion to Lord Shiva, makes a lot of sense. It's pretty crazy to picture the seemingly peaceful ascetics transforming into fearless warriors.
Yeah, I mean, that contrast is really essential to understanding who they are. The Naga Sadhus blend all of these seemingly contradictory qualities. They're fierce, yet gentle, detached from the world, but willing to fight for it when they have to.
So let's say someone's listening to this and thinks, wow, this sounds incredible. I want to become a Naga Sadhu. What would that journey even look like?
I want to tell you, the process is definitely not easy. It's been described as even more demanding than military training. It's this multi-stage journey that really tests a person's physical and mental endurance. But more importantly, it tests their spiritual commitment.
Wow. Is it true that the akhadas, those warrior monk orders we were talking about, really put prospective Naga Sadhus through, like, the ringer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first stage is even called investigation. And background checks are only the beginning. They're testing a person's commitment to the entire path. But the most crucial test is their ability to practice celibacy, or brahmacharya, for a super long time, anywhere from 6 months to 12 years. It's really a level of discipline most people can't even imagine.
That's wild. So only after proving their total commitment to celibacy are they granted diksha, which is permission to enter the next stage of training. What happens then?
That's when the real transformation begins. They enter a life guided by 5 gurus: Shiva, Vishnu, Shaktimata, Surya, and Ganesh. They start wearing the typical attire of Naga Sadhus: ash, saffron, and rudraksha beads. It's like stepping into a whole new identity.
Right.
Then they move on to the avadhut stage, which is where they renounce all worldly concerns.
So they shave their heads and even perform their own last rites to symbolize their death to the world. That's a pretty powerful statement about their dedication.
It really is. This ritualistic death signifies their complete detachment from their former life, their family, their possessions, everything. But it doesn't even end there. Our sources describe this intense 24-hour ritual focused on suppressing libido. The sadhak stands under the akhada flag with a heavy weight on his shoulder and water pots in his hands.
And during this ritual, their phallus is repeatedly beaten. I can only imagine that would be incredibly painful, to say the least.
Yeah, it's an extreme practice. It's meant to weaken sexual desire. The sources describe it as the final step in becoming a Yoda, which means a warrior for Sanatan Dharma and Farat. So basically, Sanatan Dharma refers to the eternal order or law that underpins Hinduism, and Farat is another name for India.
So essentially, they become warriors for their faith and their country. It's all very intense, to say the least. I think it's pretty clear that this path isn't for everyone. It requires a level of dedication, discipline, and pain tolerance that most people just couldn't handle.
Yeah, for sure. And even after all of that, becoming a Naga Sadhu is only just the beginning. Their lives are then governed by this whole set of rules and rituals, which we'll get into next.
I can't wait. It sounds like their daily lives are just as fascinating as their initiation process.
Okay, so we've talked about the incredible journey someone goes through to become a Naga Sadhu, but now let's dive into the rules and rituals that really shape their daily lives. And remember that whole principle of detachment we talked about? Yeah, it pretty much shows up in everything they do.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine, like, how do you even structure your life around a concept like that?
Well, celibacy is really the foundation of their entire practice. You could say it's the bedrock that everything else is built upon. It's not just about abstaining from sex. It's about complete mastery over desire.
So it's more about mental and emotional detachment from, like, sensual and worldly things than just the physical aspect of it.
Exactly. And remember that symbolic act of death to the world. When they perform their own last rites, it's like this powerful reminder of their total commitment to renunciation.
Yeah.
I mean, they've cut all ties with their former life, their family, their possessions, everything.
Yeah.
And that detachment, it extends to material possessions as well.
Yeah.
They usually live with very little, often only wearing a single saffron cloth, or even going completely naked.
Wow. That must take some serious strength of character, especially in a world that's constantly telling us what we should own and how we should look.
Right. It's this deliberate choice to reject all those worldly attachments. Their only adornments are things like ash rubbed on their bodies and rudraksha beads, which hold spiritual significance.
Right.
Speaking of appearance, you've probably seen pictures of Naga Sadhus with that long, matted hair, or jata.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Is there a specific reason they maintain that hairstyle?
Yeah, it's a symbol of their renunciation and their connection to Shiva,
Hmm.
who, as you probably know, is often depicted with dreadlocks himself. So letting their hair grow freely, uncombed and unshorn, it shows their detachment from vanity and social norms. It's a really powerful visual statement.
Totally. Given this intense commitment to detachment, I'm curious about how the Naga Sadhus approach something as basic as eating.
Yeah, so they practice a form of begging called bhiksha, where they go to a maximum of 7 houses to receive food just once a day. Whatever they're offered, they accept with gratitude. No complaints or preferences.
It sounds like a really humbling practice, to rely on the generosity of others for your sustenance.
It is. Bhiksha really cultivates humility and detachment from material comforts. It emphasizes their reliance on the divine for their basic needs.
So where do they actually live? Do they stay in monasteries or temples or something?
They often live in more secluded areas,
Yeah.
away from all the hustle and bustle of towns and cities. And for sleeping arrangements, they sleep on the earth. No beds, no cots, not even mattresses.
Wow. Everything about their lifestyle really reinforces that idea of, like, stripping away all the comforts and facing life's challenges head on. So what role does their guru play in all this?
The guru is absolutely essential to their whole path. After receiving Diksha, the sadhak is given a mantra by their guru. And their life then completely revolves around this mantra. It becomes their spiritual focus, their guide for meditation, and basically how they understand the whole world around them.
So it's a total surrender to the teachings and guidance of their spiritual teacher.
Exactly. You know, earlier we were talking about their historical role as warriors. I'm curious, though, do they still train in weaponry or engage in combat in the modern world?
That's a great question. I imagine it's a lot different now than it was centuries ago.
Yeah, you're right. Some Makatas might maintain those martial traditions, but today they mainly emphasize spiritual practice. Their role as protectors of Hinduism has become more symbolic now. They're upholding the values and traditions of their faith.
So in a way, they become like warriors of the spirit, fighting against ignorance and attachment instead.
Exactly. They're constantly engaged in this inner battle, this struggle to overcome the ego, and ultimately attain spiritual liberation. It's pretty remarkable how they combine that intense physical discipline with this deep spiritual focus.
It really makes you wonder, what drives someone to choose that path? A path with so much hardship. It's pretty different from the way most of us live our lives.
Right. And that brings us to some really big questions. Like, what leads people to embrace this path of extreme renunciation? And what lessons can we take from their incredible commitment, even if we don't choose such a radical path for ourselves? We'll talk about those questions as we continue our deep dive.
It's been really eye-opening learning about the Naga Sadhus. It's a life that most of us couldn't even imagine, let alone, like, actually embrace.
I know, right? It really makes you question things. I mean, the level of discipline and self-control they have is incredible. They're constantly turning away from all those things that allure us, all those comforts that we take for granted.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, what even motivates someone to choose such an extreme path? I mean, what kind of person just willingly renounces everything to live a life of, such austerity? There's got to be something more to it than just wanting a simpler life, right?
Yeah, it's a question that's fascinated people for a long time. I mean, some might look at it as escapism, like they're rejecting all the complexities of modern life. But I think it goes way deeper than that. Think about the world we live in. We're constantly bombarded with distractions, desires, demands on our time. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed, lost in all the noise.
I think a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling. It's hard to find peace and quiet in a world that's so, I don't know, hyper-connected and hyper-stimulated.
Exactly. And for some people, the path of the Naga Sadhu offers this, like, radical solution, a complete break from that world, stripping away everything that's not essential. It's not about escaping life, really. It's more about simplifying it, getting down to that, like, core of existence.
So it's more about finding a more, like, authentic and meaningful way of being, a way to connect to something bigger than themselves, beyond all the pleasures and pains of the material world.
Exactly. And in that way, their journey, as extreme as it is, offers some really valuable lessons for all of us. I mean, we might not be called to renounce everything and live as ascetics, but we could still learn something from their commitment to, like self-awareness, discipline, the pursuit of something beyond the surface level.
It's a good reminder that true freedom often comes from letting go, detaching ourselves from those things that hold us back.
Right, and that there's power in simplicity, focusing on what really matters. The Naga Sadhus really embody those principles to this incredible degree.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive here, I think there's a really important question to think about. What can we let go of in our own lives? What are the distractions, the attachments that are preventing us from finding greater peace, clarity, or purpose?
The Naga Sadhus are a radical example, but their journey shows us that we all have the potential for transformation, for liberation. It might look different for everyone, but it's a journey worth taking if we're willing to put in the work.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope you all found it as insightful and thought-provoking as I have. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.